You may already be familiar with the phrase the observer effect. You've likely heard it used casually, sometimes dramatically, as if simply watching something can change reality itself. But before you accept or reject the idea, stay with me for a moment, not to be convinced of anything, just to observe closely. Right now, you're doing something very ordinary. You're listening. You're following a line of thought. You're allowing information to arrive without needing to react to it. That alone already tells me something important about you. Not that you're special, but that you're attentive in a way many people quietly are. Even if it's rarely acknowledged, most people move through information quickly. They skim, they decide, they label, and then they move on. But you didn't click away. You're still here, and that's worth noticing calmly without turning it into an identity. The observer effect, as it's often talked about online, is surrounded by exaggeration. Claims that observation creates reality, that awareness alone can reshape outcomes, or that simply noticing something grants control over it. Those claims sound compelling, but they miss something subtle and far more interesting. The original idea, in its scientific context, was never about intention or power. It was about interaction, about the fact that measurement is never neutral, that to observe is to participate, even minimally, because observation requires a frame, a method, a point of reference. But here's where things quietly shift. Outside of laboratories, observation still works the same way, not by changing the world directly, but by changing what becomes visible to you. And visibility is not the same as control. It's something more restrained, more honest. When you notice something, you don't force it to change, you simply reduce ambiguity around it. And that reduction has consequences, not dramatic ones, but cumulative ones. Consider how awareness works in everyday life. You don't suddenly create patterns when you learn about them. You become able to see them. Once you understand how traffic flows in your city, you start anticipating delays without trying to. Once you learn how conversations subtly shift when certain topics appear, you begin noticing pauses, changes in tone, moments of withdrawal, not because you're trying to analyze, but because awareness reorganizes perception. This is where the observer effect is often misunderstood. It isn't that observation causes reality to obey you. It's that observation refines what reality reveals. And that distinction matters, because the moment observation is framed as power, it becomes performative. People start watching in order to get something, to trigger outcomes, to feel elevated. But genuine observation doesn't ask for results. It doesn't rush. It doesn't announce itself. It simply notices. You might already recognize this from moments in your own life. Moments where nothing outward changed, but your relationship to what was happening quietly did. Think of a time when you realized a habit you had never labeled before. The habit didn't appear at that moment. It had been there all along. What changed was your ability to see it clearly or consider how. Once you learn a new word, you start encountering it everywhere, not because the word increased in frequency, but because your awareness created a filter through which reality passed differently. This is not mystical, it's cognitive, it's perceptual, and it's deeply human. The observer effect, when grounded, is about this exact process. Awareness does not manufacture outcomes, it changes resolution, and higher resolution doesn't tell you what to think. It simply gives you more accurate information to work with. What often goes unnoticed is that observation also changes you, not in a dramatic way, in a calibrating way. When you observe without rushing to interpret, your nervous system stays calmer. When you notice patterns without needing to judge them, your thinking becomes cleaner. When you allow experiences to register fully before reacting, your responses become more proportionate. This is why observation has been emphasized across so many disciplines: science, psychology, philosophy, without ever being framed as magic, because its value isn't in control, it's in clarity. You may notice this happen. Even now, as you listen, your mind may want to jump ahead, to predict where this is going, to decide whether you agree. That impulse itself is observable. You don't need to stop it, just notice it, and something interesting happens when you do. The thought doesn't disappear, but it loses urgency. It becomes one signal among many, instead of the only one. This is the quiet effect of observation, not domination, not suppression, but proportion. In daily life, more stress doesn't come from events themselves, it comes from incomplete observation, from reacting to partial information, from assuming intent, outcome, or meaning too early. Observation flows that process just enough to introduce accuracy, not certainty. Accuracy. And accuracy changes how you move through situations without demanding that anything else change. First, there's a reason this channel is called Observer Frequency, not because observation places you above experience, but because it tunes you into it more precisely. Frequency, in this context, isn't about vibration or energy in a mystical sense. It's about rate of attention, what you repeatedly notice, what your awareness returns to again and again. Over time, that repetition shapes familiarity, and familiarity shapes understanding. If you frequently notice conflict, the world feels hostile. If you frequently notice nuance, the world feels complex. If you frequently notice pauses, the world feels slower. The world itself hasn't changed. Your observational bandwidth has, and this is where many discussions stop short. They talk about awareness as if it were an end point, as if noticing is the goal, but observation is not a destination. It's a position you can occupy more or less consistently, and like any position, can drift. You might notice that some days you're more reactive than others, that certain topics immediately pull you out of observation and into opinion. That fatigue narrows your perceptual field. None of this is failure, it's data. Observation doesn't ask you to be neutral all the time. It simply allows you to notice when you're not, and that noticing alone, without correction, without effort, already changes the trajectory of your response, subtly, reliably. There's an open question here that's worth sitting with. If observation does change reality directly, but it consistently changes how clearly reality is perceived, then how much of what we call change is actually improved resolution rather than new conditions? And if that's true, what might you already be living inside of that simply hasn't been fully observed yet? Not in a dramatic sense, not as a revelation, but as a pattern waiting to be seen clearly enough to lose its mystery. That question doesn't need an answer right now. In fact, it works better when left open, because observation, at its best, doesn't close loops too quickly. It leaves space for recognition to arrive naturally, without being pushed. If you find yourself returning to this way of thinking calmly, without urgency, then you're already engaging with the core of this channel. Not as a belief system, not as a promise, but as a practice of noticing what's actually there. If you'd like to continue exploring this perspective quietly, intelligently, without exaggeration, you're welcome to subscribe. No pressure, just a signal that this way of observing is useful to you for now. There's nothing to do, nothing to apply, nothing to act on. Just notice what stays with you after this ends.